Well, hello and welcome to Voices in Leadership, the LeadingAge Virginia podcast. I am Melissa Andrews, CEO and president of LeadingAge, and I'm tickled, as I always am, to welcome our guests today, who I have the privilege of not just calling colleagues, but calling friends and chosen family and Wolfpack, and the list goes on and on and on of all the different ways we talk about our relationship. So I am going to ask them to introduce themselves, and I'll start, DeAnn, with you.
Thanks so much. So I'm DeAnn Akins. I am located in North Carolina, and I have the honor and pleasure of facilitating several leadership academies and leadership development programs throughout our great nation.
Great. And Libby.
Hi, everybody. Libby Bush. I am in McLean, Virginia at Vincent Hall Retirement Community as CEO. And I know we'll get into more. Is that all for now, Melissa?
Well, I should probably also say that one of the academies that DeAnn facilitates is the LeadingAge Virginia, DC, Maryland Academy. Libby is a past coach of our academy, and Libby is currently the board chair of LeadingAge Virginia. So many, many hats in this group. So let's just start with, how did you end up in the field of aging services? And Libby, let's start with you and just share a little bit of, or a lot, of your history and your journey.
All right, I sure will. And I'll ask my Wolfpack soul sisters to chime in, because you pretty much know the whole deal. I was thinking about today a lot, Melissa, and how could I not say Jean Elizabeth Gerlach Bacon is my mom, everybody. And long ago, coming out of college, I knew that I wanted to either work with teenagers, but then also senior living, aging services, older adults. And my mom had a 40-year not-for-profit management career and worked in all kinds of different ways and spaces for older adults. So the apple didn't fall very far is the short answer. There's a whole lot of fill within that short answer. Started off and became aging services focused really, well, frankly, in college, had a programmed house with dear friends I still call friends that we visited, older people who couldn't get out, and brought services and programs to them. So it started a long, long time ago. Elf in the Christmas play where mom was working. It just, the roots run deep here. And coming out of college, I just told this story, just had an all hands meeting this morning with all my staff, and told the story of working with my first older adult as a caregiver. Probably was 22 years old. She was 104 years old. And what I remember the most about her is these beautiful hands and the translucent skin and the veins, and thinking where those hands had been at that moment. Beautiful, beautiful woman. And from there, came into Life Plan Communities and have been here ever since, with really the majority of it being in the Commonwealth, one in Maryland and one in DC. And that's where it started.
Awesome. Thank you. And we'll come back to kind of that, the specific places you've been, Libby. But DeAnn, how about you?
So I was also reflecting on this, and I'll share, it took me several years to discover actually what got me into the field, participating in kind of a crucibles exercise. So when I was about 16 years old, my grandma started having some trouble at her house, and my mom was working third shift, and my brother moved out. So it was a time where I was going to be alone, sleeping at my house. My mom wasn't thrilled about that idea, and I really wasn't either. So I started spending the night at my grandma's, and not too long after that, I discovered her wrapped with a phone cord, the old spiral phone cord, you might remember those, all around her body, screaming in the middle of the night. I called my mom. And within days, we had my grandmother moved in with us. My mom quit her job as a night nurse, and I watched her care for my grandma for 7 years throughout all of my high school and my college. And I remember wearing the same suit to my grandma's funeral as I did to an interview at a CCRC, a Life Plan Community in Kansas. and walking around there thinking I was going to go into physical therapy and being offered a job in wellness at a retirement community, and being struck by that same week attending my grandma's service and the call to work in senior living. So yeah.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I will never forget that my grandmother and I were out shopping when I got the call with the offer to go work at ASA, then now LeadingAge National. And I remember my grandmother being so excited and saying, okay, we need to go buy new clothes. And I got so excited, but she didn't pull out her credit card at the register. And I didn't understand because Grammy always bought everything. And she said, you're gainfully employed now, you can buy it. But she did buy me my first ever suit when I was graduating college and looking to interview way back before that. So, I love this theme of kind of, grandmother, mother influence in our lives. I know it's one of the things that we all have in common and wear multiple hats, right? Because we're also daughters. So, just taking a little detour. I know these conversations tend to take detours, but just each of you, I know, have really been, caregiver. There's no other word to put it, right? For your moms, DeAnn, for your parents. And so talk a little bit about, how does that, what kind of this, there's the separation of roles, but there's also this confluence, right? Like Libby, I think of you being president CEO of a retirement community, but your mom was also living in a retirement community. So just, could you talk a little bit about how those roles get blended and just what that experience is like being professionals in the field and also helping your parents navigate so many things? So just whoever wants to jump in.
DeAnn, you go first this time.
Oh, thanks so much, Libby.
Yay!
Yay! So I think there was a point in time, and this will help kind of move us to when I left what I consider the formal organization part of the field, right? When I left the life plan community, I was working as a nursing home administrator and feeling the pull of long distance caregiving with my mom, and recognizing that I wasn't able to be there for her in the way I needed to be, from surgeries to just supporting her through some life transitions that she was going through. So I made the decision to step back, and I think about this idea. So Wayne Moeller, you both are familiar with, has that book Sabbath, right? And he talks about this idea: if you're driving a motorcycle 75 miles an hour down the highway, even the smallest pebble is enough to throw you. And I think in that role, it's easy for those other fellow nursing home administrators out there, really heavy in operations. It's easy to take on task after task and just to absorb it. And then it's that small thing. And for me, it was the realization that that I couldn't be there for my mom, and to want to be there with her, not only through some surgeries, but through when she's well enough to travel. So the very first thing we did was take a trip to Colorado, her favorite place. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but kind of that idea of, at some point you realize you've got to step back and take the time to prioritize what's important, not only within your own positions, but in your life.
Well, and what I hear and remember, DeAnn, is, you have spent your life working with older adults, your career working with older adults, facilitating, finding purpose, right? Living their best lives. And you wanted to do that with your mom, right? So there really was, it's like this realization that I spend all day, every day working with older adults to live their best lives. And I want to make sure I'm able to do that for the most important older adult in my life. At least that's when I look from the outside in at your life with your mom, that's one of the things that I've seen or observed.
You say it so much better than I do.
No, it's easy when you're talking about somebody else. And Libby, you with your, and Libby, also as you talk about Jean Bacon, Mima, if you wouldn't mind sharing kind of how you went from where you were into the Commonwealth and kind of that career trajectory, because it really is your life with your mom that rides in parallel, that tracks parallel, doesn't it?
It sure does, Melissa, and it's a great thing to listen to DeAnn's story and to know it like I do. I believe that I am at the place now. Mom died last year, last year about this time. That I am realizing now the trajectory toward peace and well-being in a manner that I simply didn't, because she was an indomitable force, fierce warrior, crazy caring, crazy purposeful, crazy passionate, to the point where all that influence and impact, as I reflect back over the last 30 years, has definitely, the journey has been around and around. So leaving Kansas City, Melissa, I think is where you were going, where Mom was president and CEO of Bishop Spencer Place. And she said to me then, and this was after I graduated from college, go. And I very well could have stayed right there with her. I helped her do some marketing canvas work for BSP, Bishop Spencer Place. But she's the one who said, go. You need to spread your wings. You need to go experience other things. Huge crucible moment, because the trajectory would have been very different. I think about the imposter syndrome and the ins and outs of our lives. She, in that indomitable way, so much of especially the beginning when I got to Richmond and those years in Richmond, of trying to live what she wanted me to be, trying to be I wrote some notes, Melissa, because I didn't want to forget. Perhaps even being someone that you're not, thinking you have to be, filling other shoes, taking roles and jobs based on others' expectations. And I share openly with you all, because Mom and I would talk about it later, last year even, and she was that way. And she never quit. One of her greatest assets. Also transitioned to a greatest liability. Because when you push and push and push and push, the realization that stepping back, as DeAnn so eloquently said, might be really difficult and might not actually happen. So the history with her, I think that's where you were going, Melissa. And then yes, she lived with us for 4 years, and that was a life-changing moment as well, because we were raising our children, and Mom would give us every ounce of energy she had, and she created pathways and blazed trails within her job, and I would say her family too. Sometimes, and Mom, you're listening. I know you are.
Oh, she is right now. I have no doubt. She's here.
She's always here. First of all, she'd say, Libby, why didn't you dress up a little bit more?
That's right.
So that, that's exactly what she would say. She'd say, Elizabeth, what is going on? So anyway, all of those tapes, everybody, when you think about being an imposter as you move forward in life. So bringing all those very important things with you, and shedding those other things that say patience and understanding, give grace, give the gift of grace to yourself. So I think, Melissa, I'm going to go a little bit this way, and then you'll pull me back. I think in our world, our senior living people, we are all, this is our audience today, the two that I'm with today, passionate, purposeful, caring, committed people, to the point where sometimes we empty ourselves.
Yes.
And giving each other grace is what we generally try to do, but giving ourselves grace, knowing that we're not perfect, we should be real, knowing that we're going to fail, knowing that all that authenticity stuff. And I tell you what, such a journey. So back, all those influences back then with our parents, our mothers, our grandparents, I truly believe sets us off. And then the rest is history. But where we come from is very, very important.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I also think that your mom is so proud at this very moment. I mean, she took nothing more than pride in you, her daughter, and the relationships and the successes, and just all of it. So let's talk about. So just for a second, and DeAnn, as our Academy facilitator who is steeped in this work all the time, I'm going to ask you to explain, if you don't mind, what imposter syndrome is, and we're going to talk about that a little bit.
So we're going to spend some time talking about imposter syndrome. And I think what I will lead off by saying is, when asked to do this, for those that don't know, we've rescheduled this time together a lot. And, you know, things come up, life happens, but also I admitted to Libby and Melissa that I have imposter syndrome about doing an imposter syndrome podcast. Who am I? So now you're saying to me that you want me to give you the definition of imposter syndrome. So I will share. So, oh my goodness. So I will share, I think of imposter syndrome as basically, have you ever found yourself at work or at home, but basically in life saying to yourself, like, when is someone gonna figure out that I'm a fraud, that I'm in a position that I have been asked to do a job that I have no idea what to do. So that's what I think about imposter syndrome, right? It's this idea that it's most likely because you're such a great doer and you're a high achiever and people look to you to get things done. And because of that innate leadership that you have, that ability, you're also questioning, like, oh, you know, is somebody gonna knock on my door and say, like, haha, we figured out you are terrible at your job and you are not supposed to be here. So it's that self-doubt that comes, I think, in all of us. And I think it's a very, very common phenomenon. And yeah, I think it's one that in senior living is easy to emerge, because a lot of us get our start early and we move through up, you know, we're called to the field and we have a passion to do the work, as Libby said. And so we get promoted along the way. And each time maybe that you change jobs and you get promoted, you think, am I capable of doing this? So, you know, having that feedback mechanism that maybe other fields have in place to let you know how you're doing, kind of this feedback, you know, criteria and mechanisms to let you know you're doing well. We maybe don't necessarily have that built in our senior living field. So.
See, I knew that I asked the right person the question. I knew that you would do that. So I want to just kind of unpack this. So, you know, it's a concept that I think the three of us all first learned about in the academy. So, just for our listeners, DeAnn and I were on the same team, Zango, during the class of 2010, LeadingAge National Leadership Academy. And Libby, you are class of, I always get it wrong.
2013.
2013, I was going to get it right. So we have a common language amongst us and amongst all those who have experienced either a state leadership academy. DeAnn, you also were in the LeadingAge Kansas Leadership Academy.
And had the chance to also coach for that group.
That's right.
It's tremendously rewarding. Yes.
Yeah. So we have kind of a common language, and we learned about this in the Leadership Academy. And you know, Paula, our executive producer of the Voices in Leadership podcast, she shared some background materials with me on imposter syndrome that also spoke about the fact that it really is something that affects minorities and women more than men. And you know, I think I commented to Libby recently in a conversation about whoever doesn't experience imposter syndrome is either in denial or a sociopath. And then you read the literature and you're like, oh no, or they might be just a non-marginalized group, right? So I found that just really interesting. So anybody who wants to read more about imposter syndrome, if you Google it, apparently 500,000 articles or 500 million articles come up, something ridiculous like that. So what I think is fascinating to me about you both as leaders in the field is that you each took very interesting leaps in your careers. So DeAnn, you already talked about the fact that you worked at a life plan community in Kansas, you worked at one in North Carolina, and then you one day woke up and said, no, I'm not going to do, not one day. You, after much meaningful thoughtfulness and journaling, discussions with your wonderful husband, said, I think I'm going to do something different. So we're going to talk about that. And then Libby, you probably maybe more of a traditional career in terms of life plan community enrichment, multi-site organization in the DC metro region. And then decide you're going to be the president and CEO of a military-based retirement community, the first non-military leader that they've had. So I am building an assumption into my next question that both of you might have at some point thought, are they really bringing me in to lead these academies? Are they really bringing me in? All hands, what's that, right? And so I am building an assumption into my question to each of you that you have dealt with imposter syndrome as you've taken on these incredible roles. So Libby, I'm going to start with you and ask, is that a fair assumption that I built into this question? And would you talk about how you've overcome that?
So more than fair, Melissa. So more than fair. And it's just, and DeAnn, as always, just giving us such a real excellent way to think about this. It's so hard to encapsulate 30 years of experiencing it in a few minutes. I think that the ways of managing it when you feel it can vary, and they have for me as well. Especially, DeAnn said it, when you're given or had the opportunity to have new roles, it could be within a certain place, which has been my experience a couple of times, or it could be going to another place. You can either dig in and try to be perfect and try to hit a home run in everything you do every hour of the day, every minute of the day, every week, every month, every year. You can do that with such passion and think that you are doing it well, when in actuality it's too much. And you're trying to imitate or be somebody you're not. And when I have experienced that, because I've done it, when I have done it and experienced someone who's given me that feedback, DeAnn, or taken a new role, and the place has taken actions that, you can, that gives you that feedback, which frankly hasn't been too often, to your point, DeAnn. I'm not sure we do that well in senior living. It has helped me go, wait a minute. No, that's not me. I'm trying to be something I'm not. The other thing, Melissa, I think over the years of doing things is learning to say no. It's okay because you might want to live up to someone else's expectations. And so say yes to a role that in actuality you don't really have a lot of information about, but because we do this, we want to give opportunities to people, and we see something in a person that might be great in another role. But yet it's just so important to build those bridges and build that scaffolding in for that individual to be able to understand that the impact and the influence is so much greater than what you might think. So yes, have had the opportunity to do that coming here to Vincent Hall. So Melissa, you brought up an excellent thing. Mission, vision, values, pretty much, that's it. So the mission and the vision and the values of our life plan communities has spoken to me and resonated deeply with me forever. I just said to the team this morning, effective leadership is more than one person, and the mission is always bigger than the person and the people. And yes, those are just words, but gosh, they mean something in life plan communities have been my stick, that. Yep. So coming to Vincent Hall Retirement Community for the first time as a civilian, but also the board being really bold and brave for going outside the flag for the first time almost 5 years ago has been amazing. Excellent challenge, which I always like. Excellent mission, which I love, and excellent people that make you better, which they have done for me. They being here, I'm sitting in my office. So it is what I have learned over especially the last almost 5 years is we represent the mission in different ways. The movers, the groovers, the shakers, the doers who live at these places represent everything. It could be the ministry, it could be the military, it could be business, it could be humanitarian efforts. The altruistic way I have found and been blessed to find in all places. So, but what a journey, what a learning journey. The learning of patience and understanding, especially with trying to, at times early on, especially, but still to this day, being someone who's just authentic. I know, I'll share this right now with you. So in my portfolio over the years, I still are blessed with mentors, have kept I keep things close if you can't see them. And they're worn, they're worn, look. So I just keep them. This one was
for our
given to me.
listeners, Libby is holding up pieces of paper and cards and all kinds of things that she keeps in her portfolio. So she has them close to her.
I forget that we're not on camera. Thank you.
Well, some people will be watching this and some people actually listen in their cars. I mean, I've gotten proof of that. That people do listen, just so you know.
Thank you. Thank you. So this early on, literally, it is worn, torn. You can see it. It looks like I've taken pieces and bites out of it.
Let's say you are enough.
It says you are enough.
I have a bracelet that says that, and it's one of my mantras that I use all the time.
Yep. So I thought it was very applicable and appropriate for our time together today. Point being, I'll finish for now, wrap it up, give it to DeAnn. It's just the journey, thank you, of now. And I share openly, because I can right now. I've made the decision and to go to another place in my journey.
Okay, so when this airs, that will not be your office anymore.
That will not be.
We'll have a different office. DeAnn, don't smile too big. Okay. Okay. Let's just honor and respect my grief so that our listeners will know that Libby is moving to a different state.
Melissa.
The one that DeAnn lives in.
Next to the state that you live in. So close.
The pack.
It's a, I shared with Libby will tell it, but when Libby told me she was, right when she was close to getting the new gig and to the day she got the new gig, I had 10 days of being able to work through my grief cycle. So for our listeners, I said at the beginning, Libby Bush, not only dearest friend, but my board chair. So she's my boss. So the professional, the personal, and so excited for her to move into this new role, just so genuinely excited, but also a little bit selfish that I will not have her on my board for the last 2 years or the next 2 years. And she's going to North Carolina. So that's where DeAnn is like open arms, like, yes, come to North Carolina, be with me. So we have these highs and lows in friendship, but Libby, yes, please share that you're about to take another leap.
Yeah. And Melissa, DeAnn. So the path, the journey now, and I mentioned earlier, the peace and reflection with Mom's death, and Jeff's my soulmate, his retirement last year, leaving the hustle and bustle of the DMV and heading to Asheville, North Carolina, where I'm so off the charts honored to be the president and CEO of Deerfield Episcopal Retirement Community. So the mind, body, spirit, wellness, everybody raised in Kansas City, right? The big space, just the nature of Asheville. So yes, by the time this airs, it's part of the journey that I wanted to tell you about because it continues. And I've been so honored to be right here as the first civilian CEO and taking on all those different things. How I've dealt with the imposter syndrome is through you all, through dear friends and mentors. Through learnings, through perspective gaining over the years. How many failures have I had? Oh, so many. How many how much patience and understanding that I worked very hard to gain that perspective. So that's the short answer to a very long answered question.
Well, but what I love as I'm sitting here listening to you, Libby, and now DeAnn, I'll be turning over to you, but when your professional can support your personal and your personal can support your professional, and not everybody gets to have that. And so Libby, as you're talking about transitioning from Vinson Hall to Deerfield, this is about you and Jeff and for you, going back to a community that in terms of mission, vision, values, we're all similar, but has very similar to where you started your career, thinking about how involved your mom was with the Episcopal Church, and I mean, your whole family. And this is really about you and Jeff now getting to kind of claim what you want in your personal lives. And it just so happens that your professional life is catalyzing that, right? And then, and DeAnn, I think of you very similar, right? So you were, I mean, I remember you having 2 phones as an administrator at Carolwood's retirement community, 2 phones. Why are we sitting here at dinner and you have 2 phones? And you're like, I don't know which one I'm answering. She did. She always knew which one she was answering. But then to be able to create the space and realize, I mean, that although you were incredible at your job, this is what you were meant to do, being out there facilitating leadership development for people and places and organizations and states. And I mean, all of that. And to know that that has therefore allowed you the time, not just travel to be with your mom, but to be with your husband, right? And friends and all of that. So could you talk about, my point of all this is this amazing opportunity we have all had to have that personal support, the professional support, the personal. But DeAnn, what a leap for you to leave kind of the structure that you were so used to and create this new thing. So tell us about that.
So I want to go back real quick because Libby has mentioned this idea of trying to be perfect, right? Like, and how that connects to the imposter syndrome. And so just kind of in thinking about that, I think one of the reasons that you both have been so successful in your own careers and in the field is that you understand, Harvard Business Review did that article in praise of the incomplete leader, right? It talks about that idea that the best leaders don't try to be perfect, right? They understand the importance of building a team that fills in the gaps around them. And I think you both have done such a good job of that. So I just thought it can't go without talking about what an incredible job you both have been around that awareness and ability to do that. Kind of along those lines, and thinking about my own career path and the times that I've felt that imposter syndrome creeping in. I remember at one of the communities I worked at, I had a peer who really made me feel a lot of self-doubt. Am I doing the right thing? There was like some competition. It wasn't healthy. It felt sabotaging. And I remember coming across this quote. I have no idea who said it, but it was, rudeness is the weak man's or person's imitation of strength. So rudeness is a weak person's imitation of strength. And the ability to kind of reframe the way I thought about that, and then to realize, all right, I'm feeling that imposter syndrome. I'm feeling a lot of self-doubt. I need to be sure that I'm getting that feedback. And so a couple of ways I did that, just kind of practical. And for those that are out there that haven't currently built that into their work, I had a bi-weekly meeting with my mentor, CEO, and would end every meeting either asking, what would you like to see me doing differently? Or, one of the favorite go-tos, right? What should I stop doing? What should I keep doing? And what should I start doing? So stop, start, and keep doing, or continue doing. Stop, start, and keep. And then I would go back and ask my team the same thing to give me that feedback back, right? So it's not just coming from the person that I report to, but I want to hear from the rest of the team. And the importance of that feedback that comes from, all right, I'm hearing some really good things, and then I'm hearing some areas that can help me get rid of that self-doubt because I know I can tackle them, right? So just kind of thinking about that career path for me and finding places where I think I wasn't using my strengths every day, and coming to that appreciative inquiry idea that which we focus on continues to grow. And so if we run around focusing on our problems all day, those are going to grow. If we focus on what's good, that's going to grow. And knowing that I maybe wasn't using all of my strengths to the best of my ability. And while I may have been successful in the roles I was doing, it wasn't where my heart was. So really being able to sit down and reflect with my wolf pack and have those questions asked of me. I know you did a kitchen cabinet podcast a couple of months ago, and just talking about the importance of having folks ask you reflective questions to help you get through a transition or that change that maybe when you're feeling a little stuck. So I did that, and I used those questions that were asked of me to really reflect and help me get through and figure out where I needed to be. And also Melissa, you are the reason that I do what I do. You really gave me the inspiration and the courage to take that leap. And so I attribute my finding joy in my work and then thus ability to find that joy in life in huge part to you. So I thank you for that. I don't think I say thank you enough and my gratitude for that.
Don't make me cry on my own podcast.
All right.
But I will share with the listeners, when I took this job almost 6 years ago, I can't believe it. And we talked about starting an academy. I said I wouldn't do it unless DeAnn Akins facilitated it, because I knew that would be the recipe for success.
Yes.
So my equal gratitude to you. And I think one of the themes that has emerged, and so for the listeners who this is your first time listening to us, go back. So there are terms that you'll hear throughout these podcasts, like kitchen cabinet, or as our dear friend Kathy Anderson would call it, spice rack. If you remember that, Libby, she's like, Melissa said I'm like on her spice rack or something. And that is those people that you have met in your career that you can call on them and ask them anything, and they will give you the honest to God's truth. And they will, so it's important to have. So we use all these kind of terms interchangeably. I think we have our wolf pack, we have, our girl squad, there's just so many things. But I think the theme, at least for us, has really been the importance of connection and deep, authentic relationships. So, and you both have referenced those as you've made decisions and choices throughout your careers. So just in the few minutes that we do have remaining, could you talk about how do you foster, with everything going on in your lives, you both have incredibly robust lives. And a lot of that robustness I know is because of the relationships, but how do you intentionally foster and nurture these connections with other people who are not in your family, right? They're not necessarily in your neighborhood. We have cross-country, deep-rooted relationships. So how do you foster those with intentionality? And DeAnn, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind.
Sure. And I like all the language you're using. Peter Parker calls it the Clearness Committee. So if that helps kind of describe it a little bit, like, okay, it's to help you find that clearness in what you're working through. So I will say, I have a Post-it note to help me remain intentional about who is in my, I call it Square Squad. Brene Brown, thank you for the Square Squad language. And those folks, when there is a wedding, a birthday, a funeral, we're there. You're there. You drop everything and you go to them because they're the people who are going to get you through life. So it's also a group that it may be several months and we don't talk, but that connection is always there. And it's that group of people that you can call in the middle of the night and say, I need you, and they will be there for you. So that's, I think fostering it is making sure that you're there when they call you, and you've got the questions ready to ask them, and just to sit. Sometimes it's just to be there and sit with them and just listen for an hour. I don't know that there's a magic recipe to it, but it's finding the right group and holding them close.
Yeah. How about you, Libby?
I think the perspective, gaining the perspective that you are enough, shows up with people you have history with, shows up with people who you intentionally have kept in touch with, whether it's over the years or months, because with some people I have found the deep dive happens really quickly, and you could have a download of your total being with that person and they get it right away and you get them right away. I'm very grateful for the people in my life, and there's not a lot. I mean, I just spent a few days with my young adult children, was so grateful that I could. We had this discussion about true, real people who you can count on to give you feedback. Your greatest cheerleader, your greatest supporter, but that wasn't, Libby, really, you need to do something different. It builds your assurance and your confidence, because truly we are enough in who we are. And those strengths are there. It's letting them showcase themselves. It's working on our opportunities always. And with I'm still working on it, Melissa, to make sure with intentionality that I keep with these people who I know are part of went to a funeral of a dear friend who we raised our kids together in Richmond. Her father-in-law died, and that history, that component of knowing and understanding each other when we're with each other at our most vulnerable moments, know the real deal stuff. There's nothing like that perspective. And so always need to, I try to work on that every day to build that intentionality in, because it really does help with your strengths and what you're trying to do in your life every day, personally and professionally.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I mean, you both know, I've shared with you that, from going from, traveling all the time to then not going anywhere for 2 years, specifically, even after being vaccinated, because of Eliza had been unvaccinated until December. And, dealing with kind of the effects of that, of finding, like, trying to figure out who am I? Like, I know who I am in relation to other people, but who am I? And really been struggling with that. Libby, you and I had a parking lot conversation. DeAnn, you and I had a post-lunch conversation. And me at my worst, when I feel at my worst, I'm at my angriest. And having to, and DeAnn has probably seen that more than anybody in our relationship. Unfortunately, that's what sisters have to deal with, my poor behavior. But I think that remembering that you are enough, not just in work, but in relationship to other people, is such an important lesson. And I think everybody could benefit from that. And then just the continue, as you said earlier, Libby, the grace with yourself when you do make mistakes, and realizing that, the people are what make the difference in our lives. And what a blessing to be in this field where we have that intersection, right? Yeah, there's always somebody walking behind me in the window, right? Those who are listening, you can't see, but I have like a major walkway behind me, and sometimes there are geese, sometimes a bird will fly right into the window. You just know they might be mowing. That happens normally during board meetings. You just never know. So as we wrap up, I want to ask each of you, first of all, thank you. I mean, we could do this for hours. We typically do for hours, curled up on a couch or at a restaurant or wherever we are. But what one piece of advice, headline, would you give your younger self just starting out in this field?
So I would say, because I feel like it's an interesting close. Ralph Waldo Emerson, right, said, "How much of life is lost waiting?" And I think it's very easy for us to put so much energy and anxiety into trying to look over our shoulder and say, when's someone going to figure out I'm a fraud and I don't know what I'm doing? To let that go and to take that energy and use it towards those strengths. Figure out what your strengths are, and go out there and do it, right?
Yeah. And I'll add to that, whatever makes us our best self and tick in our best way, find those, take time. I would say to my younger self, take the time. Yes, you've got these other people who might want you to be this, or expectations of this, or giving you opportunities to be all that. But take the time to find what truly your best self is. Everything, right? The low-hanging fruit, music, getting physical activity, being outside in nature, coffee, wine, whatever it is, whatever, in all sincerity, families, relationships, all of that important things, your spirituality, whatever it is, and take more time with that younger self, because that's really the core, right? And then the other stuff comes from that core. And instead of, for instance, the other stuff coming first. And again, I've just come off the time with a 25-year-old and 22-year-old, my heart, my pride, my joy. And what you're trying to do now with them, back to being your younger self. So that's what I think, Melissa, that's the answer that comes first.
Well, listen, this was worth the wait for me to finally be able to speak to both of you today. Thank you so much, not only for all that you are in my life, but all that you have been to the field, your little C communities and your big C communities. You have made all the difference in so many people's lives. I mean, through your works in the academy, but as well as just your involvement at the state and national level. So thank you both for the exceptional people that you are. And I love you both dearly. I'm going to publicly say that. And just thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I'll add to it. While we're here, Melissa Andrews, Paula, thanks to you.
Thank you.
Love you.
Love you.
Well, so I am like verklempt, if that's still a word that people use and know. After that conversation, Paula, how did it? I said you're our fly on the wall. So you take it all in and then you kind of respond. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I think I told you when you started trying to get them together to record this that I had no idea what imposter syndrome. I never really heard of it. And then I actually saw it on a Hallmark movie the other night. They were saying it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay.
That is more alarming that you're watching Hallmark movies or that they talked about imposter syndrome.
Jeannie, Shally, and I are Hallmark movie fans.
I love it. I love it.
Anyway, but in the article I sent you, and I also sent it to them as well. So I was reading over it going, yeah. I've never really thought about it in regard to me, except for that perfectionism.
Yeah.
And then saying, take that perfection as Libby was talking about it, and it's more about that I have to continually frame in my own mind that it's about, how I'm growing personally, professionally, spiritually, and all that kind of stuff. So that's all it's about. And I know I have said this at least twice to you. I said, I never want to disappoint Melissa Andrews. And that's my perfection going, I got to do it right. I got to do it right.
Yeah.
But I gotta let go.
My response always is, you can't disappoint me. But I appreciate that. It's so funny. I had forgotten until this moment, when I got this job and received my offer letter, I was actually in North Carolina with Tom and DeAnn Akins in a room signing. They were standing with me. They actually took my picture when I signed my offer letter. And my point in that is that these relationships I've been so blessed to have in my career, they run so deep. And as somebody who has a very small family, I have a very small family, it's amazing to have these incredible people in my life that I learn from every time I talk to them. I've had millions of conversations with Libby and DeAnn, but still today, I am taking away so much in that, just that I am enough, right? A dear friend who I hope we get to record on this podcast, I'm going to ask her, sent me a bracelet that said I am enough. And I think that's so easy to lose sight of, especially with everything going on in the world, right? There's just so much stress in our individual lives, then just world stress. And that reminder. And then I always love listening to DeAnn, she's steeped in leadership theory and thought and practice, right? So when she talks about that appreciative inquiry, what we focus on is what grows. And so remembering to look at our strengths, what we're good at, and let go of the criticisms that we have for ourselves, that little voice in our head that can really take you down. That little voice in your head is powerful. So yeah, I say this every time, Paula, we both do.
Another one for the books.
Another one for the books. Well, thank you for always being our fly on the wall to help kind of recap this with me. It's always fun to do this with you.
It's been fun. Thanks.